hearts are yearning, though your lads are far away, they dream of home.
World War I, or the Great War as it became to be known, began on the 1st of August 1914, when Germany declared war on Russia, and ended 4 years later, on the 11th of November 1918, when Germany signed an armistice with the Allies. During that time, there were more than 37 million military and civilian casualties, 16 million deaths, and 20 million wounded. Imagine twice the population of London being killed, and a third of the population of the UK being wounded over 4 years. World War I changed warfare forever. It became an industrial warfare. This was the first time aircraft, tanks, and heavy artillery were used with a deathly consequence beyond anyone's imagination. At sea, submarines destroyed many ships bringing much-needed food and supplies to Britain and Europe. As a consequence, rationing was introduced for the first time. To discover the roots of World War I, we must first look back in history to the 1800s, when conflicting empires clashed for supremacy. To the east, the Russian Empire had been expanding, threatening both the Ottoman Empire, which stretched from the Middle East through Turkey and Greece into Europe, and had held on to its power base for more than 600 years. To the west, the Austro-Hungary Empire, later to be known as the Habsburg Empire, held its place in the balance of power. But in 1871, the German Empire was declared, and Germany was created from the many Germanic-speaking states. This added an extra dimension to the already powerful mix of diverging powers bordering each other. In 1888, the Kaiser Wilhelm II became the ruler of Germany and began an aggressive expansion of colonies and the German military. He also supported the Boers in South Africa against the British. Following the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia, and on August 3, 1914, Germany then declared war on France and invaded Belgium. Britain then declared war on Germany on the 4th of August 1914. After the first battles of the war, trench warfare reached its highest development on the Western Front. Millions of men faced each other in lines of trenches extending from the Belgian coast through northern France to Switzerland. These trenches happened within the first few months of the war. After the great offensives launched by Germany and France had failed, because of the deadly fire of the machine guns and the rapid-firing artillery, the sheer quantity of bullets and shells flying through the air in the battle conditions of that war compelled soldiers to burrow into the ground to find shelter to survive. Food, ammunition, fresh troops, mail, and orders were delivered through the trenches that connected the front line to the supplies at the rear. These networks of trenches contained command posts, forward supply dumps, first aid stations, kitchens, and holes dug in the earth for toilets. Most importantly, it had machine gun posts to defend against an attack, and it had dugouts deep enough to shelter large numbers of defending soldiers during an enemy bombardment. 1/3 of all Allied casualties on the Western Front were actually sustained in the trenches. All soldiers in the trenches soon learned to curb their natural instinct to peer over the parapet of the trench into no man's land. To do so was to invite a well-aimed sniper's bullet, and many of the new men died on their first day in the trenches as a consequence. Aside from the deaths caused by the enemy, disease took a heavy toll. Among the main killers were typhoid and trench fever. Another aspect of living in the trenches were the companions that occupied the trench alongside soldiers. These were the vermin that brought with them all manner of disease and discomfort. I am talking about rats. Millions of them infested trenches. There were two main types, the brown and the black rat. Both were feared, but the brown rat especially, as they could grow as big as a cat and would climb on the soldiers' faces when they were asleep. The weather also played its own part in the dreadfully harsh conditions that the soldiers had to withstand. The long winter months of cold, snow and rain meant they could be up to their knees in freezing mud for days and weeks. Many developed trench foot, which left untreated would cause loss of toes or even the foot itself. In October 1914, Turkey entered the war on the side of Germany. In January 1915, saw the beginning of Zeppelin raids on Britain. These airships brought the war to the home front, and for the first time, ordinary people at home felt the destruction and fear of war. London had many raids by the Zeppelins, and Woolwich Arsenal became a target because of the arms factories there. At the arsenal in Woolwich, women's involvement in the production of armaments grew as the war progressed. With the introduction of conscription in 1916, this resulted in a shortage of working men as they went off to fight in France and other places. The women workers produced 80% of the weapons and shells used by the British Army. Many soldiers from what was then the British Empire also fought in World War I, coming from as far away as India, many parts of Africa, the Caribbean, the Far East, Australia, and New Zealand. Although there were many battles during World War I, in 1916 the Battle of the Somme took place between the 1st of July and the 18th of November on both sides of the River Somme in France. This battle was the largest of World War I, in which more than 1 million men were wounded or killed, making it one of the worst battles in human history. In April 1917, the United States of America declared war on Germany, sending men and weapons to Europe to fight with the Allied forces. November 1917, British tanks won a victory at Cambria. This battle is remembered because it was for the first time that large numbers of tanks were used successfully. However, tanks had been in operation since 1916. In December 1917, British forces took Jerusalem from the Turkish armed forces. Throughout the war, horses and dogs played their part in the war effort, and they even had to wear gas masks in case of a gas attack. Many of these animals received medals for their bravery. Even pigeons were useful in carrying messages back or on spying missions. In January 1918, Russia and Germany signed a treaty after the Russian Revolution in 1917. By August that year, the Allied forces had made huge advances. 30,000 German prisoners had been captured and 300 artillery pieces. By September, the Turkish forces collapsed at Megiddo, and in October 1918, Germany asked the Allies for an armistice. This was followed by peace with Turkey and Austria. After the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II, Germany signed an armistice with the Allies on the 11th of November 1918. This day is remembered on the same day each year as Armistice Day, so that we do not forget the millions of men and women who gave their lives in this tragic war. The war that was to end all wars.
Who'll sing the anthems and who'll tell the story? Will the line hold? Will it scatter and run? Shall we at last be united in glory? Only remember for what we have done. Only remembered